I'm just finishing up this square, and I'm going to weave in my ends. And I usually just weave in on the one that the needle is still attached to, and just pull that in gently. And I leave a little bit of a tail just so that I can tell myself that this is going to be the wrong side of my work. That way I can face all of my squares in the same direction. I do not cut or weave in the beginning tail because I use that to sew with. I'll blast this with a little bit of steam, being careful not to melt the plastic, and that will keep my loops neat. After steaming, I'm going to let this one sit for a while. It helps if you have more than one loom because I can just set this one off to the side and get started on a new one. And these are some that I've already steamed, and you can see that the loops are very visible when they've been steamed while they're on the loom, because they're nice and open where you can see every individual loop to sew the blocks together. The other thing I like to do is face them all in the same direction, so that when you're looking at the corners, they're all the same. On the loom you'll find some have only like two little ones here, and then some don't have any on the corner, and then a couple of them almost look like there's three loops there, and that has to do with the corner pegs on the loom and how the final square is wrapped around those corners. But again, that's why I like to have them all facing the same direction. They just stitch together better that way. There are times when you're not going to be able to do that, but I like to try. So also with these little tails I've left, I know that both of these are with the wrong side facing up. The first one I'm going to show is the mattress stitch, and it's going to be the most invisible stitch. For the mattress stitch, I'm going to turn both of these right sides up, and I'm not going to twist them around or anything. They're going to both be oriented exactly the same way. Their corners are going to be identical. I'm going to go ahead and thread up my tail that falls between these two, and I'm going to just join up in this corner right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and go through this loop and this one. I'm not going to pull it tight. When you look at these loops, you'll see a loop, a place where they cross, and another loop. I'm going to be going into these through the loops with the X on the top. So in this loop and out the next one, and skip the place where they cross. So I'm going to go across here and grab those two. Just go straight through. You don't need to pull tight right now. And then back over to the right hand side. And then over to the left. Continue this all the way to the end. This is not the strongest seam, but it is the most invisible. And you'll see what happens when I do slightly tug on that. They're going to nest with each other. All of these loops are going to nest in between each other like that. So I'm going to continue all the way to the end, and then we'll look to see how the finished seam looks. When you get to the end of this seam, depending on which way you turned your blocks, this is that end that almost looks like it's got three sections of loops on it. This is a corner that's sort of empty, So I'm just going to choose these two loops where they cross here and not those two. I'm going to choose these two. You just have to decide when you get to the end what's going to look the best. And then I can tug on that, straighten out that seam, and then I can lock these two together by weaving in, well, my needle came unthreaded, but then you would lock these two together and then weave your ends in. Now it's going to look a little different on the wrong side, and you can decide before you do this which side you like the look of better, the wrong side or the right side. Either one to me looks nice. So if you like this side better, then you would lay your pieces wrong side up before you start. Or if you like this side better, then you can start with the right sides up. But you can do some test pieces with some leftover squares just to see what seaming technique you want to use. Now you'll see for maybe a blanket that this seam would be okay. It will pull apart when it's under stress, like if you were using it in a garment. In that case, you may want to double your yarn to give it a little more strength. Or if you don't mind it gapping like that while you're wearing it, then go ahead and use this seam. But I most probably would not use this one on a garment, probably only on a blanket. I'm going to take the one that I just sewed with the mattress stitch. I've got it wrong side up. I'm going to take my new block and place it exactly in the direction that I placed the other one with the wrong side up and my tail over here. Now with this stitch I'm going to still do alternating loops. They're not going to line up together. There is this same whip stitch that I'm going to be doing. You can line them up perfectly straight across from each other and whip them together that way. I don't really like that method, but you have to actually turn the blocks and find the side that matches up. I don't usually use this one. I use the one that's alternating loops. And I want these right sides together, so I'm just going to hold them together with the right sides facing each other. I'm going to use this tail to sew with. And this is a much stronger seam. And so make sure you're starting in the right place by lining up these alternating loops. Now on the end we're going to have an extra loop, so I'm going to grab this single loop on the corner. This is the tiniest corner that we have as it comes off the loom, so I'm just going to join the edge like that. And when I'm counting these loops or numbering these loops, when I'm looking left to right, this is going to be loop number 1 and loop number 2 on the back piece. On the front piece it's still going to be left and right. This is going to be loop number 1 and loop number 2 on the front piece. So I'm going to be joining loop number 2 from the back with loop number 1 from the front. So I'm whipping, I'm always going in from that direction. I'm going to go loop number 2 through loop number 1. Pull it up snugly but not too tight. So now I have loop number 1 through loop number 2 on the front. And I'm always going in from the same direction. So loop number 2 on the back through loop number 1 on the front, and you just keep alternating that. Now it's loop number 1 through loop number 2. So whichever way you start sewing, in my case I'm always going from the back to the front. Just be consistent with that and continue alternating. If it's number 2 on the back, then it's going to go through number 1 on the front. So I'm going to sew all the way to the end on this one. Okay, I'm at the end, so I have loop number 2 on the back, and there's actually 3 loops that I could go through on that funny looking corner, but I'm going to choose number 2, which I call 1 and 2, and the other one actually goes around to the other side. and this is loop number 1 on my front piece. So I'm going to just go through those two. A lot of times on the ends of these seams, you just have to make a decision where to put your needle to make the seam look as neat as possible. So there's actually no corner loop here. So in looking at the way this is joined, I can also open it up to see what the best route to go is, and I choose to stitch one more. I'm going to go in through, let's see where I went last time. I'm going to go in through that next loop because this one's already been used, and I'm just going to close up that corner with an unused loop. And I'm going to run my tail in a few times and weave that in and go ahead and clip the thread. So on the wrong side you get a little bit of a ridge, which really doesn't look that bad if you like the loop, the look of that. Put that in the camera a little bit better. And on the right side you're going to see the whip stitches. They look like little ladders in between here. And when you're using the same color yarn, it's it's almost not perceptible, but it is a stronger seam than the mattress seam. It doesn't pull apart right there in the middle. This is where the seam is, right along here. It holds pretty tight. This is a very soft yarn, kind of stretchy, so it may not be a great demonstration of how strong that seam is. This is a project that I'm using rectangular looms and small 2-inch looms to do this brick pattern, and I've used that last whip stitch that I just showed. I'm using that method of seaming on here. So when you're using several different colors of yarn, you're going to see the seam, and I didn't like that, so I decided to do a contrasting thread using a crochet hook and chaining in and out with the crochet hook, pulling up a chain and chaining along the seam line. That makes the seam stronger, and it also gives a decorative effect.